So we're standing in the lobby of the Intercontinental Hotel here at the Wharf in Washington, D.C. And we're walking into kind of like the main dining area of Moon Rabbit right now. You know, Moon Rabbit is more upscale dining, and the food's like more blended and progressive. For our family, I think like most like immigrant families, food is always like the very center of it, right? Like every Sunday we'd have a different family member's house we'd go to, and then all the moms and aunties would cook in the kitchen, and it was like huge. And we made like a big thing out of it, right? Also be drinking a Budweiser because it was like the American thing to do. And, you know, as a family of like refugees, you know, we were kind of like living this American dream. And I think a lot of the food that I cook now is really inspired by back then. A traditional Vietnamese dish, for example, is like bun xeo. And it's normally made with like coconut milk, a little bit of water, and rice flour. But one of the things that my uncle used to do is like, you know, if you put like a carbonated aspect into the batter recipe, it ends up being crispier. So like, you know, crack open a Budweiser, put in the batter to make it extra crispy, and then you can just drink like the other half. So it's cool to see like very American things like beer go into like things like Vietnamese food. But also on the opposite side, even though food is such a big thing in our family, single mom and she was raising 2 kids. I was the oldest. We were also like very food insecure as like a family of refugees too. And it wasn't until really that I finished college and started like working that I was like less food insecure. A lot of my team members have worked with me prior to me like even like owning my first restaurant. One thing I try to do is like be very open and honest, like not just with the team, but with myself, and how like our work relationships are. And I think that's one of the things like everyone like really like respects about like working here, right? Like we have a lot of open dialogue, not just about like how to do the work, but what is it like working with each other. And I think because of that, we're able to like constantly create a better working environment that gets better every day. This doesn't start to feel like a job anymore, but it feels like a place where you can come and like grow professionally and like emotionally as well. So around the time that we opened this restaurant, I had never really cooked Vietnamese food in a professional setting. It was something I kind of like always avoided because being a chef, sometimes you feel like you're pigeonholed into like cooking a certain way. So I said, well, if I'm gonna cook Vietnamese food, I need to have some people come like try it first, and then obviously it's my mom and my grandma. And to be honest, that's the first time they've ever eaten my food in my whole career. I was a little nervous, and they tried it, and I cooked for them personally, like an 8-course dinner. And obviously they said everything was good, and then there was a but, and they always give you feedback, right? I think for them they're more surprised about the space, right? Because like we had very like humble beginnings. And like we would have never thought that like Vietnamese food could be presented in such a beautiful atmosphere. So that got them like very emotional. And then when you see your like mom and your grandmother emotional, like I was like, I can't get emotional, but it was like very emotional. We're sitting here specifically in Bryant Street Market, Northeast DC. As far as our delivery service goes, you know, we definitely want to make food that travels well for everyone to like reheat and kind of have like the experience of like, oh man, now we're a part of like creating this Moon Rabbit dinner. And as far as the pop-up space goes, we're actually just playing in the kitchen a lot, doing a lot of recipe testing, rotating our menu. We're cooking a lot of like new food items that weren't on the old Moon Rabbit menu at all. A new permanent space for Moon Rabbit is 100% the goal. All of our staff are ready and waiting and excited to see like what the next evolution of Moon Rabbit is going to be. I think food halls are a very easy, low barrier to entry for a lot of entrepreneurs. I highly suggest it. If you find like a lot of success with it, then I think from here you should go into your own brick and mortar.
The Culinary Corps represents the best of the American food scene, and we're thrilled to partner with some truly extraordinary chefs. Kevin Tien, executive chef at DC's Moon Rabbit, which he calls a love letter to his heritage as a first-generation Asian American, and a co-founder of Chefs Stopping API Hate.
First off, it was like a real honor to be part of the Culinary Corps. Food is an excellent way to kind of learn about someone else's culture. In the room, I had no idea that he was gonna shout out my name. He started talking, I was like, Ben. I was like, who's he talking about? And then my wife's like, he's talking about you, you dummy. Chefs Stopping API Hate was really born out of a necessity during COVID. I think there was a lot of rhetoric used against the Asian community, like blaming the Asian community for the COVID-19 virus. You know, we wanted to finally speak up. For me, the best thing I knew how to do was cook. During COVID, we just said, hey, let's just like start making food. We're already doing a bunch of like to-go food. So let's make these curated boxes to raise money, and then we can donate it to organizations on the ground all across the US that are doing things to kind of like help like curb the violence. Whether I'm at work or at home with the family, I think it's very important to give like over more than 100% and be more than just like present. You know, me being in the room is not being present. Me being in the room and having like interactions and connections, that's like what being present is. Even if it's for a short amount of time, I can like give my all and like really be involved in like people's lives, whether it's at work or at home. Don't be afraid of like trying something new. Just do it. Learn from those failures. You know, there have been plenty of times where like I've done things and it definitely didn't work out. It's a long process, and you just gotta like tackle it little by little.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to everybody. This Q&A session with Chef Kevin Tien. I want to start, Kevin, by explaining to some people, non-Americans who might be watching, about the holiday of Thanksgiving, which just happened yesterday. And it's a big holiday here in the United States, and it's a holiday that completely revolves around eating. It's all about a big family meal. And people in America travel to be their Thanksgiving meal. I wanted to ask you, as a chef, and specifically, you know, you're working in the Vietnamese space. What do you cook for Thanksgiving? Do you cook the traditional American turkey, or do you give it a Vietnamese spin, or what does your family have for that?
You know, we try to do a little bit of both. I remember some of the first Thanksgivings we had as a family here in the U.S. There was an argument amongst our family about how to do it. Do we do a traditional Thanksgiving, or do we eat the food that is very important to our culture, but just on this American holiday? And I think to settle all the argument, my mom came up with a great idea, which we kind of use in our restaurant today. She was like, hey, I'll do the turkey, but I'll just do all like the flavors of like Asian cuisine. And then she's like, I'll do a prime rib, but I'll also do like Asian flavors on it. So it was a good way to kind of honor our heritage, but still do a lot of American traditions.
Yeah, I think it's one of the nice things about Thanksgiving is you can do whatever you want to with it, and all the sort of various cultural members of the American melting pot can kind of do their thing. And as long as you're having a nice meal with your family, you know, it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I know you recently had a son, right?
I did.
Was this your son's first Thanksgiving?
His very first one.
Wow. How was that?
It was great. You know, I think like most adults, you eat a lot of like food for Thanksgiving, and then you take a nap. So it was nice to like take a nap with the baby at the same time, wake up and have like a second plate and take another nap. But, you know, this year we kept it small. We invited some of our close friends over, and, you know, we love doing it like potluck style, and everyone kind of brings a dish that's very important to them.
And so I know, you know, being a chef is an incredibly difficult, time-consuming job, and you kind of have to be at the restaurant all the time, and there's so many things you have to oversee. has it been difficult for you to balance that and having a family? Has your work-life balance changed since you became a father?
It's definitely changed a bit. I'm trying to be more aware of my time. I would say before the baby, we used to close up the restaurant, and I could easily sit there for another couple hours continuing to do work. But now, as soon as we close up, we get out. I try to get home at a reasonable time, so that way I can be up early with him and kind of spend the morning with him, get ready for the day, because I know I'll be gone most of the day and the night. So that's been really important to me. Is like our morning routine.
That's great. You were mentioning your mom, your mom's influence on your Thanksgiving meal. Most of the chefs I talk to, like when I ask them who's the cook that most inspired them, they usually say their moms. And I'm just wondering if that's true in your case. And if so, what are sort of the dishes your mom used to make when you were a kid that you still make today or try and emulate if there are any?
I think it's really funny because my mom was a big person in our family to like push us to be very American. So anything I learned like a lot of like Vietnamese culinary wise or Vietnamese flavors was from my grandmother, and then from my mom. I think from her I learned like a lot of like American traditions, and then in my career I'm just kind of blending both.
Right.
I think my mom gave me the things that I love today about American culture that I think other people in other countries, when they think about American culture, it's probably accurate. It's like football,
Hamburgers.
barbecue, hamburgers. Like those are the things that I remember doing a lot with my mom, making sure we had like, celebrating the 4th of July, these like big American holidays.
That's interesting. Now, you grew up in Louisiana, is that correct?
A little bit all over the place. I spent the majority of my older life in Louisiana, high school and college. But prior to that, in elementary, middle school, I lived in California because that's where like our extended family is. And with a lot of like probably Asian families, they tend to stay close together, if not even in the same house. There's going to be multiple generations in one household. But I guess as we got older, my mom started her career. She had to do a big move, so we made a big move from California to Louisiana.
And then now you're on the East Coast. So, I mean, you made sort of an even bigger move. Like you're really on the opposite side of the country from most of your family.
Yeah, and if the trend keeps going, my son will end up in Europe, I guess.
And let me ask you, because you lived in Louisiana. I lived in Louisiana when I was a kid too. And I think Louisiana of all the American states maybe has the strongest food culture, just endemic to that state. And did that influence you at all? I know in one of your new ventures is like a hot chicken thing. Is there a Louisiana influence in your cooking?
Absolutely, so much. I think one of the things I like to do now is like anytime I do any kind of sauces or stocks, and I need to thicken it up. It's very like roux based, which is like Louisiana, but also like has a lot of like French influence in it. And then I love my love of fried food is definitely from Louisiana. And then anytime there's like a big holiday, I love to do like a big seafood boil, Louisiana style.
Right, crawfish boil.
Exactly.
Is there a lot of fried stuff in Vietnamese cuisine? Is that a sort of traditional element of Vietnamese cuisine, or are you kind of bringing that in as an outside influence?
There's definitely like fried aspects of like Vietnamese food, but I think one of the biggest like things that Vietnamese food and Southern food have in common is like our love for seafood. So whenever you do dine at any of our restaurants, we are a very like seafood heavy restaurant. Also like a lot of pork.
Right. And what's the spicing like? Because Louisiana food is known for its heat. And I'm just wondering, like Vietnamese food to me doesn't seem always as spicy,
Yeah, I think I like to think a lot of like Louisiana and Vietnam in terms of like climate, right? I think both are there, like both places very humid, can be very hot, uh, lots of wetland. So whenever I'm thinking about making new dishes, I think about comparable produce or products that are grown in both places. And that's how I come up with like new dishes. I think both cuisines are like very heavy in garlic. Um, and Louisiana likes to use different chili peppers than like Vietnamese chilies. So I'm definitely constantly like swapping those items out and seeing how a dish will turn out.
Cool. And you started your own restaurant, Moon Rabbit. I'm just wondering where did the name come from? It's such a cool, evocative name.
Yeah, so Moon Rabbit's based off of I'm going to say Vietnamese folklore, but there's actually different renditions of it in like Japanese, Korean, and Chinese culture. But they say when you look at the moon, there's like a little dark, shallower silhouette, and that's actually a rabbit that lives on the moon amongst like the gods and goddesses that live up there.
Okay. And is it sort of propitious? Is it a good luck thing, or you just thought it was like a?
It's So when we opened the restaurant, it was like peak COVID, and it was a lot of like the industry kind of doing what it could to feed others, like the frontline workers, and feeding their communities and neighborhoods at the height of the pandemic. And I think that required like a lot of sacrifice from everybody. And the story of Moon Rabbit is about the sacrifice of the rabbit. And the reason it gets to live on the moon with the gods and goddesses is because it had a very virtuous heart, and it sacrificed itself to feed others. So, I found the story very like close to home, and to like kind of what like all the chefs and like hospital workers were doing at that time.
Oh, that's great, and it just sounds cool. It's just a really good name.
Definitely fun.
So you opened Moon Rabbit like when COVID was happening?
Say COVID was started in like February, March. Right. We opened the restaurant in October, and that's when that was like right around when Omicron started. Opening was pretty rough. We opened the restaurant. It was 30 days. We had to close the restaurant because of Omicron. We waited till the spring. We opened, and then in the spring there was like a huge like increase in like COVID cases, so we closed again. So within the first year of the restaurant, we probably were only operating maybe 6 months out of that first year.
Wow. I mean, that just financially, that must have been incredibly challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely stressful. When we opened, our team was very small. It was, 3 of us in the kitchen and maybe 3 people in the front. And then now, like, Moon Rabbit has probably around went from 6 employees to almost 60. So we've definitely grown a lot.
And so now you're in the new space in Market, Main Street Market, and just kind of talk a little bit about the difference between running a restaurant in a brick and mortar location and running like a pop-up, and what are the differences between those two kind of businesses, or your workflow? How have things changed since you moved into the new location?
I think as we're in this pop-up space, the biggest difference for us is kind of like the flexibility, just because it's a pop-up. So there's not any kind of like perception about what we should be or what how service style our food should be. So really we get to play around a lot with our menu, try different service styles, and really just like chat one-on-one more with our guests to kind of see and get their takes on everything. So that way when we move into our new permanent home, new brick and mortar, we could take really all that one-on-one feedback that we've gotten and be the best version of ourselves.
Right. So it's kind of like this enormous focus group that's sort of telling you what's working. That's great.
It's a very tasty focus group.
Yeah. And let me ask, I'd like to ask you to explain, because it's sort of touched on in the video, but not with any sort of specificity. And that is just about the 2 services you have, the delivery services. So you have Hot Lolos, right? Just to explain what you're doing with those 2 concepts.
Yeah. So in our food hall, we have a very casual concept, which is like hot lolas, and like a Southeast Asian barbecue concept. Quick grab and go, and then only like 3 to 4 nights a week we do like a full service Moon Rabbit restaurant. This neighborhood doesn't have a lot of like restaurants or that are close by. So really, we're kind of doing all of the above to kind of see what like the neighborhood really wants. We're trying to be really in tune with the community.
And is Hot Lola's like a Nashville chicken thing, like a hot chicken?
Yeah, so Hot Lola's, we focus a lot on like fried chicken, but we take like the techniques of like Southern Nashville chicken. But I do a lot of like Asian flavors with it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I should say to people from outside the United States, if you ever get a chance to try Nashville chicken, they're kind of known for a very spicy fried chicken that other people are now adopting throughout the United States, and it is delicious if you like super spicy food, which I do. When you've had to work with partners, right? Like, and you've had sort of investors and people that are backing your efforts. What's that experience been like, the business side of it?
I think it depends. I've had like various businesses. Like I've had a one-on-one partner before. I've had investors. I've worked in a hotel where the hotel was like the main operator, and I just kind of contributed the ideas. And I've also been a individual business owner. I think at the end of the day, for me, I like a lot of creative freedom, and I always like to change things up all the time. And I find the best structure for me is just to kind of be individual and on my own as an entrepreneur. The road's a lot tougher financially, but I get a lot of like creative freedom in how I want to operate the business, like structurally and like with the food. So I prefer.
It sounds like you would rather concentrate on what's going on in the kitchen than what's going on in your bank account.
Yeah.
Obviously the two things affect each other, but but as it is now, you sort of have to do both, right?
Yeah, and I don't mind that at all. I think the way we operate our businesses, we're very open with everything with our team, including the financials.
Right.
And in doing so, everyone's like a lot more bought in to the business. Because if our guests are happy, it contributes to the staff success. The staff's happiness and their success contributes to the business success, and it just kind of goes back and forth, right? So everyone's like really bought in.
Right. That's great. I'd like to ask you about, in the video, we saw Secretary of State Blinken talk about your work with chefs stopping API hate. And if you could just talk a little bit about that, like how that came to be and what your involvement in. That's great.
Yeah, so Chef Stopping API Hate started during COVID. There was a large rise in crimes, specifically hate crimes against the Asian community, and it was really tough to kind of figure out what I could do personally to kind of contribute to make things better or bring more attention to it. And during COVID, we were already doing a lot of takeout, so my co-chef and partner Tim Ma and I decided to get a lot of chefs to help create a bunch of like custom dinner packages for multiple chefs and multiple restaurants. And we raised money to where we could donate to different organizations all over the U.S.
That's great. And were those chefs centered mostly in the D.C. area, or were they kind of all over?
We started in the D.C. area. At first it was just 5 of us. And then I said, hey, this is working pretty well. Let's go bigger. So just sending off a couple text messages, Instagram messages, and DC got up to 45 chefs.
Wow.
And from that point on, our chef friends in other cities saw the work we were doing, and they're like, hey, we want to be able to help and kind of amplify your voice and help raise funds as well. So from there, we expanded to 5 different cities, between 30 to 45 chefs each. And in that year, we raised right above like $200,000 to be redonated.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, it seems like obviously is an exercise in empathy, and it seems like empathy is a really important skill for a chef to have because you have to deal with a large staff and be understanding about them. You have to be understanding about your customers. Just talk a little bit about how you think being empathetic is an important part of being a chef.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to, as a chef, you always want to just kind of focus on the food, and sometimes you can get lost on everything that's on that plate in front of you. You know, but having like grown our business from 6 people to 60 people, the only way we were able to do that was kind of like build relationships, not just with the staff, but with our guests and vendors, right? And we're just constantly changing our business model, so it's better for our guests, and then it's also like better for our staff. And I think a business should be constantly evolving. I think, or otherwise, you can kind of become stagnant, and uh, you know. I think it's better for the longevity of the business to always constantly evolve and try to be better.
And have people, staff members and crew that have worked with you through all these different iterations? I know that the restaurant business is a very mobile business, and people move around a lot and go, work at different places. Are there any people who have sort of stayed with you consistently, or?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of my like co-chefs and chef partners now. One person, Alan, he's been with me since I was in Louisiana. So
Wow.
that's like been like 15 years now. My other co-chefs, like Judy Beltrano and Chef Minsu, I've known them since I started my career in Disney here in DC like 10 years ago. And a lot of my staff, they've worked with me from anywhere from 5 months to like 15 years, and it's like one of those things, right? I think when it comes to, there's so many like job opportunities in the city, but I think like it's kind of having like the right group and the right work culture that kind of keeps everyone around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that, is kind of a testament, I would say, to you being a good boss. If people want to hang around and keep working, on whatever you're working on, it's a nice. I think it reflects really well on. I'm interested. It seems like even when you're working within a different kind of Southeastern Asian influences, but is there any kind of cuisine that just is completely different that you like to eat or like to cook? Like, do you sort of come home and sometimes make Italian food, or just something that is from a completely different tradition? I guess,
Oh, yeah.
What other kinds of food do you enjoy eating and cooking?
I think when I dine out, I'd love dining out and having Italian. That's like I could, maybe because I used to do like cross country and track, so we'd always carb load with pasta.
Right.
But also, I love like the idea of like Italian traditions and meals, where it's like it's also very like family and family based.
Right.
And then obviously huge love for Japanese cuisine. I love like Eastern European like stews. That's like I love like a good stew, like a 1-pot thing. And then maybe I just like food. I love I love anything. I'm just a big food person. I just like to eat.
Yeah. Well, so I guess that kind of begs the question, and it's is there anything you don't like? Is there any kind of cuisine where you're like, I don't really get it. It's not really exciting to me.
I try to keep an open mind. There's lots of like new things that I'm like still eating, and I find that a lot of times when people don't like ingredient or a food, it's most likely just in like the preparation of that ingredient. And I think you can find like a flavor profile or a different preparation of whatever the ingredient is to get someone to really love it. I think a lot of times someone will say like, "Oh, I don't like the soft texture." Well, let's find a way to make it crispy. Or I don't like to eat like certain types of sushi. Well, let's try like a different flavor profile on it, and you can find a way to enjoy it. And I think that's the fun part of being a chef. It's finding a way for people to enjoy foods that are like outside of their comfort zone.
Right. So it's not the ingredient; it's the preparation.
Exactly.
So I live in Southern California, and Southern California has a really great Southeast Asian community, and you can get Southeast Asian food all over the place. I think probably for a lot of the people watching, it's less available to them. And certainly in the United States, I would say that, sort of pho is like the basic Vietnamese food that everybody is most likely to encounter. But what are some other dishes, Vietnamese dishes, that you would recommend, people seek out?
Yeah, I think when you go to a Vietnamese restaurant, I think most people's go-to is pho, which is it's like a beef noodle soup. But if you want to stay in the soup category, I recommend bún bò. It's a spicy beef noodle soup that has a different soup base with different noodles that are much thicker.
And do they do the same thing? Because what I love about pho is how you kind of get the external ingredients and you can kind of choose yourself what you want to put in,
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then I would say other Vietnamese dishes that I've really loved are actually when I go to a pho place, I always get like a rice plate with the different grilled meats because I love grilling myself and I love like a good char on a lot of my proteins. Yeah, I think banh mi's are always excellent. We've been playing around with non-traditional banh mi's over here, which has been really cool. So we're hoping to put that out on our menu soon.
Yeah. Do you have one dish that you would say is like your signature dish, like the thing that you're sort of really proud of, and it's always going to be on whatever menu you make?
Yeah, right now it's our probably our crawfish and noodle dish. That dish has really been a blend of like a Viet Cajun crawfish boil. So we use like a Japanese style ramen. We make our own miso from scratch out of garlic, and then a lot of like Louisiana crawfish, and then like and crab fat, and we make a really beautiful, delicious pasta out of it.
So it really is just like a straight mix of Louisiana culture and Vietnamese culture. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's what one of the things I love about American culture is the way that it mixes things together in these kind of new combinations, and you get these new delicious things. To me, it's one of the best things about American food. Do you have a dish that's kind of your favorite dish to make? Like the act of preparation is sort of more fun for that than some other thing, or is there some part of your cooking process that's kind of drudgery, and you're like, I got to do this?
Yeah, there's a dish called in Vietnamese called bun xeo, which is like really fun to do. It's a savory crepe where you make a batter out of like rice flour, coconut milk, and turmeric. But you have to there's like an art to it. You have to get like the batter to be poured thin enough in a pan to get it crispy. It's filled with like bean sprouts and herbs.
And was it you would pour beer into it to make it crispier?
Yeah, absolutely. Because my uncle would like to use beer in it because it has alcohol and it's carbonated, so it creates like a crispier like outside.
It sounds delicious. And then would you just eat that by itself, or do you have that with a sauce or meat or?
Yeah, so on the inside you can have most of the time it's like shrimp and pork belly, but you can eat it lettuce wrap style, and there's normally like a dipping sauce for it.
Cool. So you moved out of your original space. You're in Bryant Street now. What are your plans for the future of Moon Rabbit? Like where do you think you're going to go to next?
We're still on the hunt for a new space. Hopefully we'll find one soon. But in the meantime, we're just doing a lot of recipe testing, having a little bit of fun. And then when the new year comes, just kind of hit the ground running and find that new home.
Right. I mean, you were so successful. I'm sure that when you sort of announced that you were leaving that original space, you must have had a lot of offers to move into new spaces.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I'm wondering what made you say no? Like, what wasn't right about those offers?
I've probably looked at right around like 20 restaurant spaces right after. Um, but I think for us, we wanted to find a space that was right for what we wanted to do and make sure it's the right time. Give us some time to think about how we want to change Moon Rabbit or evolve it next.
Well, it seems like this what you're doing right now is the perfect way to buy some time, but it also make your product better, while
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
looking around. So I want to ask you, we saw in the video Secretary of State Blinken, um, and you were part of the Culinary Corps, the U.S. Department of State Culinary Corps. Can you just talk about that, like what that experience has been like, and what it was like to hear him and how's that been going?
Yeah, it's been really great. We've had some different chefs here in DC do a couple, I guess I'll call them assignments for now, for different representatives from other countries that have come in town. I think a lot of it is you want a chef that'll be able to like understand the food or flavors of the visiting ambassador from the other countries, but also at the same time we want to show like their version of those foods that we've done here in America. I think America is such a big melting pot of so many different cultures that we've had an opportunity to make a lot of different things our own that are new and exciting. So to be able to share that with different foreign dignitaries is like really cool. You know,
How do you think food and cuisine fits into diplomacy? Like, how can food help countries come together?
I think there's one thing that it doesn't matter who you are or where you are in the world. You can always agree on good food. And I think once you have a really good meal and you bring everyone to the table, I think you can learn a lot about somebody through their cuisine, and then that you can just kind of start the dialogue from there. It's like, oh, I've had this Eastern European dish. The flavors are very familiar, but can you teach me about like what ingredients you use, or tell me about how you learned about this dish that your grandmother, and tell me about the history of the dish. And I think it kind of opens up a lot of conversation for like more understanding, and then I think from there you can kind of really build upon that. But
Yeah,
food
it's really,
literally.
I work as a musician, and I feel like food and music are very similar, and that they just unite everybody. Everybody likes to eat, everybody likes music, and it's rare to find those things that are just basic human loves that all people have. It's great, and so congratulations on being part of that.
Thank
We're
you.
going to take questions from the audience now. First question from somebody who's watching is, what advice would you have for new chefs looking to start a restaurant, or in particular a pop-up?
I would say try to get as much feedback as you can initially. Start with your friends and family, right? And kind of gather their feedback. I think at the end of the day, the people that will support your business are the ones like going to it. And just be very open to the feedback. I think when I started doing my pop-ups, definitely got a lot of feedback that I didn't want to hear, but I think at the end it's always like really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have people that you can trust enough to take criticism from. I thought it was incredible that you cooked for your mom and grandmother when you were opening Moon Rabbit, and that was very brave of you, I think. But
Oh yeah,
it sounds like they had some good feedback.
yeah. I mean, if anything, they're the biggest critics.
Right. But of course, you know that what they say is right. So Okay, another question. The work culture in the restaurant business can be extreme at times. How do you balance efficiency and taking care of your staff?
I think that's really tough, right? But I think at the end of the day, we live by a couple like models here. Um, we try to do everything with integrity. Uh, let's say it's really busy and things are taking a long time. I would rather us send out the best version of the dish than kind of do something really fast and send out like not the best version of whatever dish we're doing. And I think a lot of that is okay as long as you have communication. Uh, so a lot of the times in our restaurant, we'll just tell tables like, "Oh, the kitchen's a little behind. We just want to make sure the dish comes out like perfect for you." And I think as long as you have that line of communication with the guests, they definitely understand. Most guests know that restaurants are hard; they're understaffed at the moment, and a lot of times we find like different ways to make up for it. We'll do like an extra small pour of like wine or something. It's like, "Oh, thanks for being patient. Here's like an extra small pour of wine from us." Or, we send out like an extra small bite from the kitchen to kind of hold them over for the time being.
And what about, I know from talking to chefs that, there's a real sort of culture of partying, because you're sort of working so hard and then you're done at like 11 o'clock at night. And so I know that sort of there's a real danger in the culinary business of sort of alcoholism and substance abuse. Is that something you've worried about or ever had to deal with, or because now you have a family, so when you're done, are you just going home and the night is over?
Yeah, even before like having our son, I kind of had stopped drinking for the most part, like many years ago. I think in college, in the first couple years of being a cook, I would go out and have like a post shift drink, which I think is great. I think a lot of these times is how you kind of like build your relationship with your coworkers. But I also know that sometimes, like if you are in that routine, you can it can kind of go overboard. So for us, we find like different ways uh, for our staff to like kind of get together. So whether it's like some people do a cookbook club. Sometimes we pick a restaurant of the month that we want to go to, and we go out as a team to like explore new cuisine. Or we do like different activities together that don't just involve like having that post shift drink.
Right. I know you mentioned that you had a barbecue with your staff for your son's first birthday party, right? Which
Oh yeah,
which is great. That just sounds just sort of team building experience.
yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. I love, obviously I love like having guests over. That's why I work in a restaurant, but it's always I love it even more if I can host our team and our staff.
That's great. Okay, another question. You mentioned loving Eastern European stews. What has your experience been with Russian or Eastern European cuisine?
I'll be honest, I haven't had much like exposure to Russian cuisine, um, and forgive me if this isn't a very uh, Russian dish, but let me think. What was that stew I had? 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, you're looking it up.
I had one of my old bosses that I worked with was Russian, and she made this like delicious stew. And I'll be honest, I probably won't be able to pronounce it, but it's a sweet and sour beef stew.
Okay.
Uh, and I just remembered it was like such a good like balance of flavors because I love like contrasting flavors in the soup. Lots of potatoes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very hearty.
it's a Solyanka, I think, but my
Okay.
apologies if I butchered butchered the how do you say it?
Yeah, it sounds delicious. And you had that here in the States?
Yeah, for when I first moved to DC, um, and one of my bosses, she was Russian and she made some at home. for like my first winter here in DC because it does not get cold in Louisiana.
Right.
So it was really great.
It's really good cold weather food for sure. So next question, having worked at, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Oyamel?
Oh yeah, Oyamel.
Oyamel, excuse me. Having worked at Oyamel, how has iconic DC and global chef José Andrés influenced?
I think for me, I think Jose Andres, when my first week of working for him, he's a big time superstar chef that's traveling the world. But the first week he came in, introduced himself, and he had looked over my resume and like learned a little bit about me, and I was really impressed that he was so in tune with all of his staff. And and I think outside of making delicious food, he does a lot for the community, which has really inspired us to kind of like do the same with our restaurant.
Is he also involved in Culinary Corps?
He is, yeah.
Yeah, I seem to remember his name being mentioned. And how did you guys cross paths? Like, you worked at his restaurant.
Yeah, and I worked for his restaurant group, which was named Think Food Group at the time, for about 4.5, 5 years here in DC.
Looking for another question from the viewers, but I don't see any. Here we go. Is knowing how to cook well a gift from God or a skill?
I think it's something you definitely learn and you develop over time. I would say I'm constantly trying to like learn new techniques, use different ingredients. But it's something that takes a lot of time and dedication. Like I think, like most things, if you want to learn how to be an excellent violinist, it takes time and practice. And I think the same goes with cooking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to know, like, when you were a little kid, were you kind of in the kitchen making weird stuff, or is that something that happened later in your life?
I think I was always curious with food as a kid. Even if I didn't understand how cooking worked. Like, for example, I remember being like 5 and wanting to make Jell-O. But obviously I don't know how to make Jell-O. And I just opened the packet, put on a plate, and I put all the powder in the refrigerator thinking that, like, the next day I should turn it into Jell-O. And it was still a plate of powder the next day.
Whoops. That's interesting. Do you think you have a more developed palate than the average person, like at the end of your life?
I wouldn't say more developed than the average person. I think I've been lucky to have traveled a lot in my life and lived in so many different places. I was able to experience a lot of different foods, and I think that was like really huge in developing myself as a chef. Was being able to experience so much.
Do you think your palate is something that you can sort of learn to improve your sense of taste just through experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've done that through your traveling. Here's kind of a related question. Is there a limit to taste combinations?
I think there is a limit to the different things you can pair together, especially if your knowledge of ingredients is only so big. But I think like the more like cooking techniques that you can learn to apply to, like, let's say 5 different ingredients, that's where it really expands like the combination of like what you're doing with it.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was at an Italian restaurant and I had olive oil gelato, and that just seemed like the craziest idea in the world. Absolutely delicious, and I kind of try and have it every time I get the opportunity. What general advice would you have for amateur chefs looking to develop their cooking skills?
I say it's really easy to develop your cooking skills now, I think, because there's so much like information online. I think just watch a lot of videos, read a lot of books, and I think like put it into practice. And I would say don't just do it once and say you've mastered it. I think you do it as many times as you can until you get the best version of it that you can do.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, and then keep doing it.
Yeah. Did you go to culinary school?
So I did not go to culinary school at all. All of my experience is from on-the-job training.
So you're really self-taught.
Yeah, definitely self-taught. I mean, and honestly, I don't like using the word self-taught because it just means I learned it myself. But it's like there's definitely a lot of people that I've learned from. I think whenever you work in a restaurant, if you're a cook, go in early, ask questions, ask to do it, like really jump in. I think a lot of times when I see like new staff come in, they're always kind of like scared to do something because they're afraid they'll mess up. But I think that's kind of part of the process. Jump in, do it. If you do mess up, that's okay. And just like learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, and really learn by doing it sounds like is what you did yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Waiting for another question. Is there any, just while I'm waiting for an audience question, we were talking about combinations. Is there any sort of taste combination that you don't like, that you think doesn't work?
I've had like weird things put together and it turns out to be very delicious. And there's going to be one like flavor combination that we're playing with right now for our new menu. We're going to do durian, which is like a kind of a very pungent fruit from Southeast Asia. And we're going to pair it with caviar at our next menu change.
Wow. And have you tried that?
It works in my mind, but we'll see what happens when I do it in person.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because isn't durian, there's some fruit, like Asian fruit. I remember being in Malaysia and there was a sign saying no durian because when you open it, it smells incredibly bad. Am I thinking of a different thing?
No, that's it. That's definitely it.
Yeah, and then the fruit itself is delicious, but when you cut it open, it releases this really terrible smell. And so when I was in Malaysia, there were signs in the hotels that said no durian fruit. What is the most unusual thing you have eaten?
I mean, I've eaten everything from different. I've had sea cucumbers, shark jellyfish. I've eaten snake, moose. I've had raccoon before. Different insects.
A lot of weird things. But were any of those things completely unpalatable? Like, were there any of those things where you just spit them out? You were like, no way.
I would say I enjoyed most of it. The only one I did not enjoy was probably just the raccoon.
Yeah. Did it taste gamey?
It tasted like what a raccoon would eat.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't an appealing idea to me eating raccoon. Like how was it prepared?
It was deep fried, so I thought it was like, oh, it's deep fried, it can't be bad.
Right.
But it definitely wasn't great.
Well, here's kind of a related question. What is one dish everyone should definitely try once in their lives?
I would say, that's tough. One dish, huh? Man, I'm trying to.
And I guess maybe if you concentrate on Vietnam, the cuisine of Vietnam, I think that might narrow it down because I probably have not had much in the way of the Vietnamese cuisine.
There's one thing I always like to take people to do. I think if you can enjoy, I love Peking duck, and I think if you can get the full Peking duck experience, that's like really
with
great.
The pancakes and the plum sauce and
they carve it tableside. That's like, I think that's something like everyone should experience. It's so much fun.
Yeah, that is absolutely delicious. I was really lucky when I was a kid that my best friend's family owned a Chinese restaurant in DC, and we used to just go there all the time. And that was the first time I had real Peking duck. And you're absolutely right; it is a real pleasure the real thing. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I am looking for it. But if it doesn't show up, I guess my question is: are there any restaurants in DC that you would recommend? Just as a chef, that you admire their cuisine, and if somebody's in the DC area, you would say definitely check this out.
Yeah, I would say I really love going to Makedo on 8th Street. I think Eric Meriang does some like really amazing Taiwanese food. If you want, I think Oyster is really great, like vegan dining experience. They do a vegan tasting menu, which is absolutely amazing. You would never think that you could prepare vegetables or other vegan items in so many different ways. I think Sushi Nakazawa has an amazing like omakase experience.
Okay.
But I also think DC has like a lot of like really great like hole in the wall places that are like Ethiopian. Definitely get some like Ethiopian food while you're out here.
Okay. I'm basically asking for myself because I'm in DC for the holiday. So
nice.
But
if you want Vietnamese food,
yeah.
But if you want Vietnamese food, go to Falls Church.
Okay. There's a big Vietnamese community there?
Yeah, there's a shopping center called Eden Center that has a lot of like Vietnamese restaurants.
All right, cool. All right, so we got this will be the last question from the audience. What do you do if you fail to cook a dish correctly the first time? Try again.
Yeah.
It's usual for you to fail the first time trying a recipe.
Oh yeah, I definitely try again, but I think for me, I try not to like jump back into it right away. Kind of like give myself like a minute or a day to think about the dish and like kind of where it went wrong. Then I can go back into it with a clear head.
Yeah, it's interesting to me listening to you talk because it seems like you can kind of envision flavor combinations in your mind, which is something I cannot do. Is that true? Like,
yeah, I definitely like a lot of times when we're making new dishes, I'll think of everything I want to put into it, and I try to like taste it in my mind, and then I map out how I'm going to get to that like that flavor profile in my head, and then I'll give it a run through, just naturally, to see if I can get there, and then I always and if we get there, I reverse engineer what I did to kind of get the recipe.
Wow, that to me is like a superpower to be able to do that. It's really impressive. So I want to say thank you to Chef Kevin Tien for talking to us, and I want to say to everybody watching, certainly in the States, but also around the world, if you're ever in the DC area, check out Moon Rabbit. Follow Kevin online to see what his new projects are, and thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you.